let's go ahead and get started. I want to be mindful of everybody's time. So, a couple of housekeeping items that I want to go over. I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but just to reiterate, if you are wanting to participate in the conversation, similar to what we just did, where it's kind of like a whole class response that we're asking for, that's going to be chat. Chat's going to be the best place for you to communicate with the entire group that's here today. If you have a specific question that you need to make sure it gets answered today, that's going to take place in our Q&A. So Stephanie's monitoring our Q&A while we're going through this session. If there's a question she can support you and answer, she'll type that response to you in Q&A. Or if it's something that we think is going to be really beneficial for me to share out with the entire group, we will pause what we're doing and we will answer that question whole class. So if it's something that you need a response back from us and you need support from, Q&A is going to be your option. If you're answering a call to action that I ask for, chat is going to be the best place to respond. There are 70 of us inside of this session. So if you're asking questions inside of the chat, that's going to be moving fairly quickly. And I don't want Stephanie and I to miss a question that you're asking that you need us to support you with. So that's why it's really important. If you have a question you need an answer, Q&A is going to be your best option. So what I'd like for you guys to do is really quickly in chat, we're going to spend just a couple minutes. I'd like for you to share how long you have been a teacher and you have been in the classroom. 22 years. Amazing, Samantha. Somebody said 116 years. I feel like that's what I saw. I don't know if that was a mistype or if it just feels like it's 116 years inside of your classroom. 26 years. Wow, Mary. And then let's see, 32 years. Jennifer, I think so far oh, nope, Joanna just beat you with 40 years in the classroom. So we have some really veteran teachers inside here. So that is phenomenal to see. And thank you guys so much. It is not an easy job that we do. And so 40 years inside that classroom is incredibly impressive. We have a lot of veteran teachers. Let me see, we have a couple people for about 5 years. We also have some newer teachers that are coming in at that 7-year mark. I say newer teachers at 7 years. It sounds crazy because 7 years is a long time in the classroom, but when you're comparing that to 40 years, that is just amazing. Okay, excellent. So what we're going to be taking a look at inside of our session together today, we're going to be exploring our Bring Science Alive curriculum. The Bring Science Alive curriculum we have available for K-5, which is what we're talking about today, but we do also have this middle school 6th through 8th grade curriculum available as well. Inside Bring Science Alive, you're going to see that it has been created and designed around the next generation science standards. Now, New Jersey and some other states, I know that we have some creative ways or creative names that we call the standards. A lot of states have adopted something that is almost identical to NGSS, but it might just have a different name. So trust that if that's the case for the state you're coming to us from, if you are teaching pretty much NGSS, but it just has a different state's name or a different name for where you are, know that these lessons and this curriculum is going to be designed for you from the ground up around the next generation science standards. What we're going to do in our time together today, we're going to take a look at some of our top lessons. We're going to break it down to a top lesson from the K2 and a top lesson from 3-5. But we're going to also talk about how and some resources that TCI has provided on great tips for integrating inside the ELA classroom. I was a 5th grade science and social studies teacher. It was not until we departmentalized that I felt like I had a little bit more time for that science instruction. And so before that, I had to get really creative, and I was utilizing science and integrating science into that ELA block quite often to make sure that I was having opportunities to instruct my students within science. And so we'll talk about some great tips and strategies and resources that are available for you with that integration into ELA. And then we'll also talk about being tight for time. Again, being an elementary teacher, oftentimes we're teaching 5 subject areas, and science, unfortunately, is not quite the contender that math and reading are going to be. So those always have dedicated teaching blocks. And sometimes if something is going over inside math or reading, it can impact our science time. In talking to teachers across the country, another thing that we hear is the variations between what your instructional time looks like inside your classroom. I talk to some teachers that teach science 3 days a week, 30 minutes a day. that they're teaching. I have some teachers that say they're teaching science 15 minutes every single day. And so it really can vary from every single site to site and state to state. And so, what are some ways in which we can save that time for you and help support you in those tight instructional blocks? And what not to miss when you're going through and you are teaching science with your students inside Bring Science Alive. And so, those are going to be what we're focusing on today. What we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually go live. So, as I mentioned, we're going to be taking a look at a K2 lesson and at a 3-5 lesson, as well as some great tips for integrating into the ELA block and some teacher tips for saving time in the science classroom. First, we're going to go ahead and take a look at grade 2. I am in my teacher subscription, and I can see right down here what I have available to me is my 3 units of instruction for K2. 3-5, you're going to have 4 units of instruction. K2, you have 3 units of instruction for science. So we're going to go in and we're going to explore unit 3. Couple of key notes that I want to point out before we go ahead and actually dive into one of my favorite lessons in here. In the unit level, we are always going to have an introducing video that's really going to introduce that unit level phenomena. So at the unit level, we have a phenomena that every single lesson or instruction that we do is going to go back in and support students being able to explain and answer that unit level phenomena. At this unit level page, a couple of other things that you're going to see are available for you is you have your performance expectations. Your PEs are really going to be like the standards that you're covering inside NGSS. So this is going to be aligned to NGSS, and you're going to see what standards or what PEs it is that you're covering throughout this unit of instruction. Other things that are going to be highlighted for you in here is our three-dimensional learning. So when we're talking about NGSS, one of the key focuses that they are looking for is three-dimensional learning that the students are experiencing in the instruction and in assessments. What does that mean if you're brand new to NGSS? Three-dimensional learning is going to encompass our science and engineering practices, which is basically how the students are learning. So we can see that they're going to be learning throughout this unit of instruction by analyzing and interpreting data. They're going to be learning by asking questions and defining problems, constructing explanations, and designing solutions. The cross-cutting concepts that we're going to be exploring throughout these lessons of instruction are going to be cause and effect, patterns, and energy and matter. And then our disciplinary core idea is going to give us the history of planet Earth, Earth's materials and systems, and plate tectonics. So when you are ready to begin instruction with your students at the unit level, you can play this video. We're going to really quickly take a look at this video and understand what our students should be able to explain and answer come the end of this unit's instruction.
I'm Luciana. I am a park ranger. America has many national parks. Let me show you a few of my favorites. This park is in California. It has high mountains. How tall do you think this waterfall is? This park is in Utah. It has oddly shaped rocks. How do you think they got that way? This park is in Maine. It is on the ocean. You may wonder, what are some kinds of land and water? Why does land have different shapes? You will explore these questions by learning about Earth's surface and how it changes. You'll make a model of a national park. Then you'll study ways to protect a park beach.
So after watching that video, what are we asking your students to do come the completion of instruction? At the end of the unit, what are we wanting them to do? Go ahead and share that in chat. Let's see. My chat is halfway off of my screen, so let me see if I have anybody. Okay, Jeanette just said you're not seeing my screen.
I do see it. It's
Okay.
just a black screen right now, is that right?
Yeah, I'm trying to get out
That's
of that,
okay.
but it's just taking me a minute.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. So awesome. Thank you. Margaret said designing a park and that has multiple features. So one of the elements that our students are going to be doing as a call to action to show their learning throughout this unit and to answer that phenomena is they're going to be designing a national park. But inside there, we also want them to be able to showcase and share ways to protect the beaches inside that national park. So when we go down and I scroll down at this unit level, what I'm going to see down below is all of the lessons inside this unit that are going to support instruction and support our students getting and gaining the knowledge to carry out designing of a national park at the end of my instruction. I can see that there are 7 lessons. Let's talk for 1 second about a lesson. TCI's verbiage of lesson is really more like a chapter. So I like to highlight this because if you're like me, my teacher brain, when I hear the term lesson, I think of what I'm doing for that day's instruction. So if my instructional block for science that day is 30 minutes and I see that everything that encompasses one of TCI lessons, it might give my heart a little bit of palpitations. So you'll hear me say lesson and chapter interchangeably together today because I don't want you to feel like you have to rush to get all of this in and there's no way for you to get this in inside of your teaching time. It really could take you, depending on your instructional time and depending on the actual lesson itself, it could take you a couple of days up to a week, maybe even a week and a half to get through one of these lessons or one of these chapters. In this unit, there are 7 lessons to support or 7 chapters to support instruction for our students. Every single one of our units is going to have an engineering challenge that is incorporated inside the instruction. Anytime you see these little 3 dot icons, this is going to let you know that this includes engineering for your students to do. And this happens to be the lesson that we're going to go ahead and take a look at in here. Notice a couple of other key things I want you to notice. We're at the end of the unit. The lesson we're going to be exploring today is the end of the unit. The students have had 6 lessons prior to this for them to build and gain knowledge. Just to take note, because this is going to be applicable when we go in and we take a look at this lesson. Lesson number 6, students are going to be exploring how wind and water change the land. So they've learned how wind and water change the land, and now we're going to go in and we are going to do an engineering task around that lesson. So clicking into lesson 7, what this is going to do is we're going to be exploring how problems caused by wind and water can be solved. We have our investigation slideshow that is created for you, the teacher. It's going to walk you through and support instruction throughout that. As we talked about, time is really limited in the elementary classroom for science instruction. And so when you go to this planning page in the investigation slideshow, what you're going to see over on the right-hand side is it's going to give you the pacing for each section of instruction by minutes. The reason why we do that as minutes is, as I talked about earlier, you may have, maybe you teach 20 minutes of science a day, maybe you teach 30 minutes 3 days a week. You can then come in and kind of pace out exactly how you're going to approach instruction in here. As we took a look at our unit level, every single one of our units has a unit level phenomenon. Every lesson or every chapter also has a phenomenon. So first we're going to go in and we're going to take a look at the phenomena here. We know that wind and water can change land. We learned that in the lesson prior. What problems do these changes cause and how can these problems be solved? These are things we're going to be exploring throughout our instruction of this lesson, and we want our students to be able to answer this at the completion of the lesson. So taking a look at this image that we see in the background here and looking at what our phenomena is, landslides can block roads and cause other damage. So looking at this image, what are some things that you notice or observe are taking place in this image? Go ahead and share that in chat for me. So rocks and dirt fell onto the road. Looks like different parts of the earth. Erosion of material. That's a very advanced second grader that we have in here. So we have erosions of material. We have the road. We can see the road. So yeah, absolutely. Your second graders are going to say, I see the street. And one of the notions or one of the things noted on there was it looks like it's wet. So you might see some different discoloration where it's darker in some areas. And that could symbolize moisture or wetness. We see debris. All right, excellent. So your students are making these observations at this point of the phenomena. If you want them to go ahead and research, they can talk to other people, whether it's their parents or the folks that they live with, or it might be neighbors that they have, and they can start having discussion with other adults about what other problems can wind and water cause And do we have any examples of ways in which wind and water has impacted and caused problems and challenges inside our own community? So going ahead and taking a look at the next slide, what this is going to do is we saw the standalone image, but we also always offer a video so your students can kind of see the phenomena in action. So when I go in here and I take a look at this video, what are some things that we see some, I'll identify a couple of things. We see similar to what we just saw in the image that there are rocks on the road and that we see a lot of rocks from the mountainside have fallen on the road. What are any other observations that you make in watching this lesson level phenomena video beside the rocks and the road? Clouds and water. Yeah. So taking a look up in the sky, I love that you pointed that out. So looking up in the sky, it looks like there's a lot of clouds. So using our thinking, maybe a storm is just passed, or maybe a storm is on the way. We see that there is an individual, a worker on the road. And so we have to kind of be careful navigating around that worker. Let's see, clouds and water. So there's water to the left of us. So we can see that this road is going alongside of a water source. When we go into that, our students have an opportunity then to ask any questions that they have inside that phenomena. We're going to now come in and we're going to define our problem. So similar to those videos that we just saw, we are going to be given an engineering task or a problem or a challenge that we have to solve as engineers. So we see that a road is built on the side of a mountain, similar to those videos that we just saw. Landslides are likely to happen and it could damage the road. You and your team are going to be tasked with engineering to come up with ways to protect the road from landslides. So what that's going to do and how this is going to look inside your classroom is inside your kit materials, you have access to all of these materials that we're going to take a look at. In this little clear shoebox, we're going to model a landslide with our students. You have access to kind of gravel and sand and some soil and some other things that are going to mimic a road type mixture. And that's going to be placed as you see right here on the right hand side. Another thing that you're going to utilize with your students is just taking a piece of black construction paper and making a road out of the black construction paper. So what that's going to look like once you have it all set up and set together for your students is you have a road on the left-hand side, and then you are modeling that mountain range with the earth materials so that your students can model what it might look like to have a landslide or a mountain on the right-hand side. So what you're going to do once your students have this set up inside of their task or inside of their stations with their groups, they're going to be tasked with coming up with different ways and materials that they can use to stop the landslide from taking place or to minimize the damage from landslides taking place. So really quickly, I'm going to put up on the board, here are the materials that are provided for you inside the kit that your students can use to then design and come up with a tool that's going to prevent the rock mixture from making it to the road and or minimize how much of that rock mixture is going to make it to the road. What is the very first material that you're immediately like, I'm going to grab that and I want to make sure I'm using this inside of my engineering design? What's the first material you want? Oh, okay. So I'm surprised. That's not what I expected. So I see a lot of clay and sticks. Excellent. So a lot of people are pulling the clay and the sticks. My go-to would be the sponge. So that it's so interesting how everybody's brain works. And this is what's so amazing with engineering. There is not a one size fit all. Your students are not going to all come up with the same exact design. And that's what engineering really is inside the real world. So it's so interesting to see where everybody's perspective and point of view comes in. So somebody else said the sticks. Some other things that we see here, we do have some straws available. We have some, it's basically like a Brillo pad or like a steel wool that's available for your students, as well as, I don't know why it just left my brain what those little bendy sticks are to the left, but it has just completely left my brain right now. So that's all available to you as you're coming in and your students are going to begin designing. Now, the first thing that we want them to do before they can actually get their hands on or touch any of those materials, we want them to problem solve and think together and come up with a model that they're going to create either in their digital notebook or in their print journals. They're going to draw out the model of the design that they want to create. identifying what materials they're pulling. They're going to draw that out and finalize their plans. Once they finalize those plans and they've showed it to you, the teacher, then your students are able to come up and gather the materials and actually begin constructing the design that they came up with together collaboratively as a group. So we've now defined that problem. Now we want to test it. So the students have drawn what their idea is. Now they're going to begin building it. After they build it, we want to actually test and see how well their design works. So the way in which we're going to test this is, you can see down here in this image, we have our mountainside that's modeled by our earth materials. We have our construction paper road, and then you can see the different design that this group came up with. They utilized the sponge and the steel wool. And then we have another individual that's going to be pouring water. That water is going to model rain and different moistures that's going to take place naturally inside earth, and how that can break down and deteriorate the earth materials that can cause a landslide. So this is how we're going to test and see how well our engineering design is going to solve that problem of preventing earth materials from getting onto the road and causing collisions or damage or unsafe conditions for those drivers who were driving alongside that road. Then it's going to take us into comparing our designs. So every single group is going to have an opportunity to test their designs out. And then we're going to be able to come back together and discuss this whole class and explore and see whose design worked best, what tweaks or changes we might want to make to our own design to improve it, so that our own personal design, we might get some other ideas from other engineers inside our class. They're going to help us better improve our design. And we want to make sure that we can really identify which was the easiest to build, which one worked the best, and then if there was any unexpected side effects that we didn't anticipate going into our initial design process. And so we're going to kind of compare all of the different engineering designs and have this whole class discussion. We've now done hands-on. Our kids haven't looked in a textbook yet. We haven't talked about vocabulary terms. We've had them really hands-on and utilizing this engineering design. And now we're going to start talking about some of the vocabulary terms, and we're going to take a look at the text. So when we talk about vocabulary terms for this lesson, we're going to be talking about the levee and windbreak. And then we also have an opportunity to always, for every lesson, whether it's an engineering design or one of our other lessons, to have a science talk. This is a big thing for NGSS. Let's conduct a science talk. I was an elementary ed major. I did not major in science. If you told me to go have a science talk with my classroom, I might feel a little lost in doing so. So what we've done for as TCIs, we've created some really dynamic guiding questions that you can use to help drive the conversation and help having that science talk within your classroom. One thing I want to point out, in case any of you are new users for TCI, anytime you see these plus signs, this is going to be talking points that you can check and see if you and your students are on track, or if you are just hearing crickets inside your classroom. You can use this to kind of drive the discussion with your students as well. And so it's another great resource that we have in here to support you, the teacher. So now that we've done the reading, students can now that we've done the engineering and we have had a conversation about what we learned inside our engineering task, students can rate where they feel they are within their own knowledge. And now it's time for us to come in and to do our reading. Next Gen always wants to encourage teachers to do the activity first, have students hands-on and learning in real time with their own experiences in those activities, and then support it with reading. And so that's how we've structured this inside of our classroom. Any questions about our grade 2 lesson that we took a look at? This is one of my favorite grade 2 or lower elementary lessons. I love the engineering designs. Any questions before I move into grade 4?
I don't see any questions, but maybe at the end, could you share how to find the printed teacher guide in the materials section for
Yeah.
teachers? Awesome.
Please remind me, just in case I get
Yeah.
caught up talking, if I forget, but yes.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into grade 4. Now, a couple of other things that we had identified we're going to talk about today is different ways to save your instructional time and to integrate into English and language arts. So I'm going to share that before I jump into one of my favorite grade 4 lessons. I'm now in grade 4. You'll see that this looks exactly the same as our lower elementary. All of the resources that you and your students have available to you are the same K5. One difference that you're going to notice is that As I mentioned, grades 3 through 5 is going to have 4 units of instruction. K2 has 3 units of instruction. So we have an additional unit of instruction here in 4th grade. We're going to be looking today at energy, unit 2. So when we're in unit 2, a couple of the other things that I want to kind of identify to you on the unit level page, we have your unit highlights. You have your three-dimensional learning progressions. This is really helpful because under your 3D learning progressions, what this is going to do, and this is phenomenal for putting this over into your lesson plans, it's going to chunk out by each lesson or each chapter of instruction exactly what you're covering, the standard, the performance expectation, how you're covering it with those science and engineering practices, as well as those cross-cutting concepts and those disciplinary core ideas that you're covering. So all of your three-dimensional learning is going to be covered in here. And then we're going to give you supports for each of those lessons that are going to support your students in being able to explain and answer that anchoring phenomena. So remember, grade 2, we talked about how students are going to then create a model of a national park. And after we've now created this model to mimic a landslide and ways in which we can solve that problem, students are going to take that knowledge and everything else they learned throughout that unit to create that model of the national park and then ways they can protect the beach. So we're pivoting a little bit from where we were with our engineering challenge, but students are still thinking of conservation and preservation within the Earth's surface. And so then we're going to go into our unit highlights. This, if nothing else, if you take nothing away from today, this is probably going to be your favorite resource that you take away from today's session. Under the unit level highlights, we'll give you any advanced prep that's necessary. So if you needed to, let's just say, grow a lima bean, I know that's necessary for one of our grade levels. If you need to grow a lima bean, it'll let you know, hey, you need to start planting that lima bean about 5 days or 10 days before your instruction takes place. It'll also give you some key things that you're going to be covering within your instruction. But the most important resource here is what not to miss. As mentioned, in the elementary classroom, we can really have a difficult time finding time for science instruction. If an assembly happens, if a fire drill happens, we know that's not taking instructional time away from math and reading, but it could take instructional time away from science. So what we've done in here is while our entire unit is built to really scaffold and approach those performance expectations that Next Gen wants you learning, and it's going to go deeper and deeper with your students. If you're really, really tight for time, these are the 3 lessons or the 3 chapters that you can't skip. Because a lot of times there's things that we might need to kind of modify and we might need to tweak or we might need to go a little quicker through. These 3 lessons, how are energy and motion related, the performance assessment, and then how is energy stored, those 3 lessons you can't skip. So what does that tell us? There's 6 lessons inside this unit of instruction in 4th grade. 3 of those I have to do, and that gives me some flexibility with my instructional time if I'm struggling with finding time to teach science. That lets me know what I absolutely have to cover with my students and which lessons I have some more flexibility that maybe I want to do a little bit of it, but I'm not going to go quite as deep if I'm needing to save some time. So that is found, again, I'll just reference this really quickly at that unit level. So I'm in unit 2 energy at that unit level under the planning box in the unit level under unit highlights, it lets you know what not to miss. And so I really just always encourage teachers to take a look at that when you're beginning to plan and you have challenges with some instructional time. Okay. The next thing that we're going to go ahead and take a look at is we're going to look first at our unit lesson. One of my favorite lessons for upper elementary is going to be this unit 2 energy for grade 4. It's going to cover how are energy and motion related. So when we drill in, similar to what we saw with lower elementary, it's going to always follow that same lesson cycle. So every single lesson is going to follow our investigation slideshow. If I go in there, it's going to follow that lesson phenomena, and then it's going to go into our hands-on activity and setting up our investigation. And then it's going to go into giving our students support with deeper content knowledge within the reading. So when we come in here, we're going to take a look at what our lesson level phenomena is real quick. So let's think. Have you ever, and it's perfect right now in the summer, I don't know how hot it is where you are, but I know there's heat waves coming through. Have you ever done a cannonball into a pool? Think about if you've done a cannonball or if you maybe are laying by the pool and you are sunbathing and somebody does a cannonball in and it splashes you. Think about what needs to be done to make that splash the biggest splash that is necessary. So, students might be making, we want to make sure that they're connecting to real life experiences and that this is becoming meaningful and relevant to them. So, if you're trying to create the biggest splash you possibly can, you might make sure that you are, I don't know, running into the water. That might help create a bigger splash versus standing still and then just jumping into the water from a still position. Maybe you're going to shift how you're holding your body, and that's going to adjust how big the splash is. And so we want our students really thinking about experiences that either they've encountered or maybe they've observed. And if your students have never been in a pool, then let's think of some different movies that maybe they've seen a cannonball take place in, and we can try to engage their experiences through that as well. As mentioned, we always have an observe, and then we have an opportunity to get hands on and to try this. So when we take a look at our video, our lesson phenomena is when a fast soccer ball hits the net moves more than when a slow soccer ball hits it. If you want to practice this and you want to get your students hands on in the classroom, making a connection to the phenomena, if you have, maybe you can check with your phys ed department and you can borrow a couple of different balls. Excuse me. So basketball is going to be a little bit heavier than a kickball. Maybe you're going to pull in a baseball that's much smaller. So taking a couple of different balls that the phys ed department has, you can have your students test this out in classroom. What if you roll a ball slowly against the wall versus rolling it really quickly, what do you observe? If you roll a heavier ball against the wall versus a lighter ball, what are you observing in terms of the noise, the time it takes to get there, or how it bounces back at you and the energy that's being produced? So as always, we have a video here to introduce that, and it's going to show us a video of a ball hitting the net. Now we're going to set up our investigation. So we're going to review some key concepts. This is the first unit. Now in grade 2, we were looking at the very last lesson of the unit. In grade 4, we're looking at the very first lesson of the unit. And let's look at some differences. We knew our students already knew how Earth's changes can be impacted by water and wind. Now we're going into starting our very first lesson in this unit. We want to make sure we're reviewing with our kids and that they have some key knowledge about energy before we get started. So we're going to review what energy is, and we're going to also review about how objects have energy and how an object can get its energy of motion. We have opportunities to connect back to the lesson level phenomena at all times with you. And so anytime you see these purple tabs, this is going to make those connections to that lesson level phenomena. So what we're learning can connect to what we need to answer by the end of instruction. We're now going to set up the investigation. One of my favorite things inside of TCI is that we've provided videos. I remember looking before I used TCI in my classroom, I remember looking at like steps and procedures that I had to do with my students. And I don't know how you operate, but my brain, when I'm reading it, I need to actually do it before it really makes sense to me. So in these videos where you're setting up the investigation, this one, Jerome is going to walk you through and model what the investigation is going to look like. And so that might be really helpful if your brain works like mine, and being hands-on or visual is going to help support you in conducting this investigation with your kids. So the students are going to come in, and what we're exploring throughout this investigation is the relationship between energy and motion. I did a ramps lesson with my students in the classroom when we were talking about energy and how far we could get the ball to roll down the hallway. So when I would do this with my kids before TCI, before next gen, it was pretty open ended. So we wanted to see how far we could get a ball down the ramp and to go down the hallway. And students kind of competed against one another who could get their ball the farthest. But there wasn't a lot of connection that was taking place between the actual activity and what does energy and motion, and how does that relationship take place between energy and motion. So we take that kind of traditional ramp lesson that we've probably all done, especially if you've been teaching in the classroom for 30 years. You've probably done some version of a ramp lesson. So what we're going to do with this is we actually create a challenge for our kids. And instead of just seeing how far they can get the ball to move, we're going to task them with the challenge. They have to get it to stop at a specific point. So students are going to utilize ramp. This is provided for you inside of your materials kit, and they're going to be able to adjust where they're releasing the ball, so the height in which they're releasing the ball up the ramp, and how what the angle of the ramp is, with the goal being you have to get the ball to stop at exactly 1 meter. So as we're coming in and we're doing this 1 meter challenge, again, Jerome can model it for you if you want to see it. But as our students are coming in and they are conducting this investigation to get their ball to stop at that 1 meter mark, and I am strict with that 1 meter deadline. That does not mean your ball is a little bit above the tape mark or a little bit below the tape mark. You need to have it stopping exactly on that 1 meter tape mark. Now, if the ball stops a little bit over to the side, but it's still in line with that tape mark, that's fine. I accept that. But your students have to get it to stop exactly at 1 meter. Now, as they're going through and they're doing this first meter challenge, they have the ability to change two different variables at once. They can change and adjust the height and change and adjust the angle of the ramp. Why are we allowing them to change and adjust two variables at the same time? Because we want them to make that connection and that understanding between the relationship between energy and motion. So, as they're conducting each of these different trials, they need to identify, did they have just enough energy? Did they need more energy? Or did they not have enough? Or did they have too much energy? And so they're going to come in and collect their data. And once they have successfully gotten it to stop at the 1 meter mark, if let's say a group finds it really quickly, you can challenge them to find a different angle and distance up the ramp that will still get them to achieve it, but it's different than the first one they found success with. And so you have a lot of ways in which, like, there's not one specific angle and distance up the ramp that works. There's a variety of them. Now, once your students have done that 1 meter challenge, we want to come back together. We want to analyze our data. We want to kind of discuss what observations we were noticing in terms of what was making the ball go too far or didn't give us enough energy. And so then what we're going to do is we have the ability under this extension to improve our design. If we're going to do this extension, this is where your students are going to learn what a common variable is. And so as they come in here, they're going to understand variables, and then we're going to set a standard variable for your students. So based on the data that they collected in that 1 meter challenge, they have to identify what they want their constant variable to be. Is it going to be the angle up the ramp, and what angle are they choosing? Which one did they find got them closest to that 1 meter challenge? If it's going to be the ramp, the distance up the ramp, what number, let's see, was it like 15 meters up the ramp, or what was it that they were finding that most success with, and that's going to become their constant variable. And then now they're going to get to test out the other and really again further that understanding and connection between the relationship between energy and motion. And if you need a little help and assistance in talking about what a variable is, there is a video and support that's going to help you understand and discuss variables with your students. So in that 2 meter challenge, if you're doing the extension, your students are doing the same thing. Except this time they have to get the ball to stop at 2 meters instead of one. And in that second 2 meter challenge, they have one constant variable and another in which they're able to change and adjust depending on which their constant variable is. So then we want to come back together and have a lot of great conversations as a class and make sure that our students really understand that relationship between energy and motion. But there's a couple of other things that we talked about discussing. So we talked about time-saving tips, and I showed you at that unit level where you could find that what not to miss. A couple of other time-saving tips. Maybe there's a day where, like, this is something you really need to hit with your kids, but you did have an assembly and you have very little time. Underneath your lesson level planning, another option that you have available to you is called Super Simple Science. This is going to be a much faster paced lesson. It's still going to cover the performance expectations and the standards that you have to hit with your kids, but it's not going to go quite as in depth as we did with the investigation. And your students have usually there's going to be a little small hands-on component to it, but typically that super simple science is going to take place within like 10 to 20 minutes, whereas an investigation might take you multiple days to get through. So the super simple science is another way to make sure you're hitting on the performance expectations, but at a much faster pace, if that's what you want to utilize with your kids. Let's say a day that you have an assembly. A couple of other things that I like to highlight in here under the learning progressions, when you're looking at your teacher planning box, I just always like to highlight this. We took a look at a lower elementary classroom, and now we're taking a look at an upper L classroom. these learning progressions lets you know exactly how that scaffolding is going to look and what you need to make sure you're teaching so that your students have success in going on to the next grade level. So we're looking in a fourth grade classroom. I can see the very last time that my students learned about energy and motion, they had a topic on it in kindergarten, and then in third grade they learned about the effects of forces. The concept of energy was not discussed yet. That's a new concept inside fourth grade. And then it lets me know how we're going to scaffold and how we're going to build upon this. And it lets me know what I need to do because where my students are going to go with this performance expectation inside of middle school. So I just always love highlighting the learning progressions because it's so helpful for us to make sure that we're setting our students up for success for whichever grade they're going into next or the next time they're going to see these performance expectations. The next thing that we have to talk about is ways to integrate this into your ELA classroom. One of those ways, if you're inside this planning box, is to take a look at our enhanced learning. These are resources that TCI did not create. We simply, our developers know that you're kind of stuck for instructional time in the elementary classroom. And so we found additional videos or interactive simulations or whatever it might be that we've shared in here. We've given you the links. If you want to incorporate that into your classroom, that's a time saving tip. But also, what we have under here is our additional reading opportunities. These are children's lit books that connect with the standards that you're covering inside of your classroom. So if you're wanting to make sure that you're covering or you're reinforcing or you're taking some time on a day that maybe you're not teaching science, but you still want to be discussing the topics you're covering in science that week, these additional reading opportunities are good places to take a look at that. Or maybe you just want to create a classroom library and you have these books available in the front of your classroom and your students can explore them whenever they have some free time. Um, anyway, these developers have found our additional reading opportunities, and you can check with your school's library or your community library and see if they have these available for you. So that's one way to help with integration inside of your science classroom. The next one that I want to highlight for you guys is under the support tab on your left navigation. My teacher brain never went to that support tab. I thought that was like the help desk. It is not your help desk. That is resources to support instruction for you and your students. One of those really phenomenal resources are the skills and toolkits, ways to support your ELA and ELD student or your students in ELA and ELD. Under here, we give you connections to reading skills, writing skills, speaking and listening toolkits, vocabulary skills. So there's a variety of resources that TCI has provided specifically geared towards those different components. And then you also have opportunities where your students can then have best practices for differentiation, literacy in science, and considerate text features. So where you're taking those that digital or that student text and you're utilizing that inside of your ELA classroom and looking at those considerate text features to help teach reading with your students. You also have your graphic organizer toolkit in here, and this is going to give you a variety of different graphic organizers. It might be really helpful for you in science, but other times you're going to see like beginning, middle, and end. And so you can maybe incorporate those into one of those additional reading opportunities and those stories that you're doing. And we're identifying beginning, middle, of end. And so you have a lot of different variations in here on the resources that are provided. But that ELA and ELD support under the support tab is phenomenal. The very last one, and I know I need to wrap it up and I need to answer that question that Stephanie asked earlier. The very last resource that we have to support you in integrating into the ELA classroom, if you go to our professional development on your left navigation, all the way down in the bottom, there is a specific professional development with ways to introduce and integrate into the ELA classroom and literacy into your K-5 classroom. And so this is a really great resource. It's going to take you, I think it's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes to do this professional development, but it's a great resource with some amazing strategies and ideas of ways that you can integrate science into your ELA block. So those are some great tips and resources that we have just built inside of TCI for you to make sure that you have anything that you might need to support with your K-5 science instruction, and then ways to save some time and ways to integrate into the ELA, which is another time-saving tip. Stephanie, can you remind me what that question was you wanted me to cover?
Sorry, I lost my mouse for a second. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
could you could you go in and show the teachers where you can get the teacher guide, the printed teacher guide per lesson in the materials section, because this is
Yeah.
really awesome.
So on your left navigation, I'm going to go ahead and click on lesson overview because I'm at that lesson level. And under your materials tab, not only will you see exactly what you need to do that RAMPS lesson with your students, but then it's also going to give you things that you may want to print off. You don't have to print these off, but we always provide them. So if your district has adopted the journals for your students, so they have the print paper journals, let's say you get a new student in January and maybe it takes a couple of weeks for you to get the materials for that student, you can come in and print off the science journal so the students aren't falling behind and they have their own materials. And to what Stephanie was talking about, you also have the ability to access the teacher's guide here. And so you can just, when you click into that materials teacher's guide, what it's going to do is it's going to open up a printable PDF version of our teaching guide and our teacher's guide in here. And so it's going to give you any of the tips and tricks, background knowledge, the purpose, the lesson progressions and learning progressions that we talked about, your materials, as well as how to make those connections back to the phenomena throughout your instruction. All of that's going to be available to you under your lesson level materials tab, teacher's guide. Any other questions or things that you want me to discuss before I quickly go through the last of our slides? Okay. I want to make sure that I go through this because there's something you guys need to have access to before we finish up in the next 2 minutes. You've seen this. I'm not going to talk too deeply on this, but please know that professional development that I just showed you, where we looked at ELA and literacy in the classroom, there's so many phenomenal resources for you. TCI is always improving our program, and anytime we do, we will share those updates with you and give you videos and ways to walk through those new resources. Highly encourage you guys to use this QR code and join in on the Facebook group or the Instagram group. What that's going to allow you to do is that walks right into this next slide. I'll go back in a minute. That's going to walk you right into this next slide. If you guys come in and you use the hashtag TCI Summit 25, and you share something you loved from Summit today or something you loved from one of the sessions or what your favorite session was, you're automatically in the running for a $100 gift card and our TCI Llama. If you have been using TCI for a couple of years now, and you really think that you have a good grasp of the program, the resources, and that you would be a really great asset inside of your district, you can go into that professional development tab. There's a Becoming a TCI Coach program. And what that's going to allow you to do is go in and become a coach, become an expert inside your school site or your district site so that you can assist new teachers, new users in TCI. Very last thing that I want to make sure you guys have access to, in the upper right hand corner, there's a QR code. Please scan this QR code. In here, what this is going to give you is our survey, and Stephanie shared this inside of chat as well. So inside of the chat, she shared our Facebook page, our Instagram page. And then we can also share the survey, or you can scan the QR code. If you complete the survey, you're automatically going to receive in the mail something for attending this session. And it's also going to make sure that you receive the completion of this lesson and you get that certificate of attendance so that you can take this back to your school and maybe possibly get some PD hours for this training. So please take a moment to scan that QR code and make sure that you fill out the survey so you get all the goodies. And also take a moment to share hashtag TCI Summit 25 so you can get in the running to get a $100 gift card and that adorable llama for your classroom. Thank you so much, guys.